Honourable Ministers, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is my great pleasure to call to order this ministerial conference of the Group of 77 and China. I wish to welcome you all most warmly. We shall now take up the agenda. I propose that the ministerial conference adopt the draft agenda that has been circulated in advance. I see no objection. It is so decided. Allow me to give my opening statement. Under Secretary General, President ECOSOC, Excellencies, I would like to welcome you to this ministerial meeting of the G77 in China. Today, the majority of the developing world face unprecedented challenges to their economic progress, as well as the danger of social and political turmoil. Over the past 3 years, our economies and societies have been ravaged by a series of crises. The COVID-19 pandemic, supply chain disruptions, spiraling prices, depreciating currencies, climate-induced disasters, and geopolitical tensions, especially the Ukraine war and accompanying restrictions. The immediate future looks bleak for most of our members. Global economic growth next year is predicted to be less than 3%. Food, fuel, and other commodity prices remain high and volatile. Rising dollar interest rates have sucked back double the amount of FDI flows to the developing countries, depreciated developing countries' currencies, and will further enlarge their debt servicing burden and ability to borrow in the markets. With the North also walking back from globalization, export-led growth is becoming difficult for most of our countries. Moreover, climate change has transformed the nature of the development challenge. We need not to only achieve the SDG goals, but also simultaneously recover from the loss and damage from climate impacts, adapt to avoid future impacts, and we are expected to contribute to the global mitigation targets. Overcoming the development and climate challenges requires Herculean efforts by our governments, and it requires extensive international solidarity and cooperation. The SDGs financing gap has enlarged from $2.5 trillion in 2019 to over $4 trillion today. If the cost of climate objectives is added, we will need several additional trillions to achieve the SDGs and the climate objectives. Excellencies, our people are suffering. 250 million face hunger. Famine haunts millions. 82 of our members are debt vulnerable. 54 are in debt distress. Financial austerity will freeze their growth and entrench and enlarge hunger and poverty. We must chart a path to break out of the poverty trap. The purpose of this conference is to initiate actions that respond to the urgent challenges confronting the developing countries and to outline a strategy to secure the reforms to the international financial and economic system required to achieve SDGs and the Paris objectives. We must thank the UN Secretary General for setting up the Emergency Task Force and support many of its recommendations. We commend the Black Sea Grain Initiative and its continuation. We urge the WFP to ensure food supplies for the 250 million in hunger. We should fully support the Secretary General's SDG stimulus proposal. Excellencies, the recently issued UNCTAD Trade and Development Report, the UNDP's Debt Report, and DESA's analysis have identified several measures to support growth and development. A call for central banks and the IMF to reverse rising interest rates, halt austerity programs, provide fiscal space to the 82 debt-distressed and vulnerable countries, including through the rechanneling of unused SDRs and debt service suspension and debt relief. The relevant UN bodies also need to examine a mechanism to cap commodity and fuel prices for developing countries, ensure their access to food, fuel, fertilizer, and discourage commodity speculation. Furthermore, developing countries which continue to suffer from the severe impacts of climate change must be assisted urgently, generously, to recover from these impacts. Even as we start work on the operationalization of the Loss and Damage Fund agreed to at COP27, in this context, my government is grateful to the UN Secretary General for co-hosting the International Conference for a Resilient Pakistan in Geneva on the January 9th, 2023. Excellencies, even as we endeavor to recover from these crises of recent years, the Group of 77 in China must take the lead in promoting the systemic and structural changes needed to revive sustainable global growth, induct equity in international economic relations, and restore our economies onto a path leading to the realization of the SDGs and environmental objectives. To this end, we should first give life and substance to the Secretary General's call for the reform of the international financial architecture. This will involve several bold measures. One, a multilateral mechanism for the sustainable management of sovereign debt, such as an improved common framework for collective debt relief and a new sovereign debt authority. Two, the fulfillment of the agreed ODA target of 0.7% of the GNI of developed countries. It is evident that where and when they wish, in response to the pandemic or the Ukraine war, the developed countries can find ways to mobilize significant amounts of concessional money. Their ODA commitments cannot be allowed to be abandoned. Three, the wide utilization of SDRs offers a critical and tested modality to generate financing for the SDGs and climate action. $400 billion unutilized SDRs created in 2021 can and must be rechanneled to development and climate goals. The new SDRs can be created linked not to IMF quotas, but to development and climate needs. The MDBs and national development banks should be recapitalized and leverage this capital to mobilize 4 to 5 times the amount from the market. In this context, we welcome the bold proposal of the Prime Minister of Barbados in the Bridgerton Initiative. 4, mechanisms must be created to lower the borrowing costs for developing countries. This can be done through facilities such as the Liquidity and Sustainability Facility set up for Africa by the ex-Executive Secretary of the Economic Commission for Africa.